All right, it's 10 o'clock, and we'll call our Marshall County Board of Supervisors special proceedings meeting to order at 10 a.m. on this last day of March, March 31, 2015, as we meet in the in meeting room 2, third floor, northeast corner of the courthouse with all 3 members present. First item on the agenda that was presented is to approve or amend the agenda.
I motion that we approve the agenda as printed.
I second it.
Motion is second. Roll call, please.
Thompson.
Yes.
Patton.
Yes.
Grabenbauer.
Yes. All right, moving on to the consent agenda, approval of the minutes for special session of March 17, 2015. Item number 3, approve request for the use of the courthouse grounds. Assault Care Center extending shelter and support access. Request the use of the courthouse grounds to place teal colored ribbons in various trees signifying support for sexual assault victims and domestic violence for the month of April. That is the consent agenda. I'd entertain a motion.
I would move that we approve the request for the use of the courthouse grounds by the Assault Care Center extending shelter and support.
I will second that.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any discussion? I would just like to say this is gonna fit in with our youth program also
For the children.
for the domestic violence and everything for the kids. So this is just kind of, April is Domestic Violence Month, so
We're going to have ribbons everywhere. Is there going to be a clash of colors?
I don't think so, but they'll have very, very important meanings to them.
Yes, they do.
Any other discussion? Well, Bobby's not here.
He was going to come. I don't know. He just might not be here.
Roll
Okay.
call, please.
Thompson.
Yes.
Patton.
Yes.
Grabenbauer.
Yes. Moving on to the meat of our sandwich. Planning and Zoning, Public Environmental Health, Weed Commissioner Department, Mr. John Kuntz, as he comes in to present an update.
Good morning. I would, I guess, start off with the public health numbers from last year as kind of a roundup of what we did for the last year. We've presented this to the Board of Health already. We did 50 septic installations at $250 each for the permits. That comes to $12,500. We did 3 new well permits at $125 each. It comes to $375. We did 12 pool inspections through the year. That comes to $3,711. And we did 6 tanning inspections at 6 facilities. That comes to $792. And we did tattoo inspections, 2 at $200 each. That comes to $400. Grand total in public health inspections, $17,778. I did not bring the building permit numbers. For some reason, it slipped my mind. I think we're in around the 50 to 60 building permit range as well.
Is that about normal, John?
Yeah, it fluctuates. To be honest with you, in this building climate, it's higher than it probably should be. We've got some special circumstances going on with what's going on in the county in certain places. So some of the building has nothing to do with residential construction or even the farming community.
Sure. John, hang on just a quick second. Bobby, we've already passed it.
Awesome.
You're ready to go. You're ready to go. Then you're gonna put the ribbons and stuff in.
Yeah, I think we'll be doing that here shortly.
Okay.
They're gonna keep tying on the ones that are, we of course won't tie them on the pine trees, but the ones that are kind of.
Now we also got the yellow ribbons that Jan Enfeld and her group, you know, and I can't think of the name of that.
We should have blue also.
Yeah,
Or maybe it's blue.
We should,
Blue,
yeah,
and-
it should be
and
blue
purple,
this
not yellow,
month.
but
Yeah.
blue. Okay.
yeah,
So
the dark blue for child abuse.
yeah,
Yes.
child abuse. Yep. So we got a abusive month ribbons on the courthouse square. So
I like to see it as a awareness-filled month.
yeah, I think we'll be very aware. But I just want to let you know, and we'll proceed with this one. But you're already passed
All right,
through.
thank you.
So, yep.
Yeah, thanks for coming, though.
Sorry, John.
That's all right. Anyway, we've got a little different climate than, say, the city does. So our building is based around different metrics. But we've done more new housing than I would have thought we would have done in the last year. Not that we're doing a lot of it. I didn't think we'd do any, frankly. But I think we did like 4 or 5 brand new houses, which for the county is a lot, especially in a year in which we really don't have a lot of building going on. So that was something to look at. This year, we don't plan on much of a building boom either. But we'll see as the spring turns towards summer now, we're gonna be getting more requests for building permits and things like that. I'll briefly touch on the weed office. Our weed policy was adopted last meeting.
Last meeting.
And so that's established for this upcoming year. We've already had some people asking for do not spray signs. And we've had one contractor come in asking to be put on our list for abatements. The abatement is when I find a violation and they don't choose to do it themselves. We send someone in and we have to pay that contractor to do that. Given the budget, I don't think we're going to be doing much of that. We just simply don't have the funds. So the weed policy is established. One nice lady wanted to know why Queen Anne's lace wasn't included, and it simply just wasn't in the story in the paper. Queen Anne's lace is part of the noxious weed law, and we are spraying for it. The spray we use is designed to go after the whole range of those noxious weeds. There are some that it doesn't go after, but for the most part, it will get any of them that are on that list. Turning back to zoning, our violations, we've got 11 open cases right now. Matter of fact, was up doing a recheck of one this morning up near the Albion area. We've got 4 to 5 informal cases. Those are cases that I haven't actually sent any letters out, but where we've simply said, hey, can you do something here? And that's done on an individual basis, depending on what it is, how bad it is, things of that nature. Most of these are junk violations. The Alliant gas line is proceeding. That's the only real interchange we have with Alliant on the new power plant. We've been working with them for the last couple of years on siting it, wetlands issues, floodplain issues. We've gotten all of the stream crossings taken care of, floodplain permits, things of that nature. There's a valve yard that will be put in up north, and it's basically a fenced off area, kind of like a power substation. And that is something we've also been working on as of late. I've had a couple, 3 or 4 other contractors contacting us to get some information and go over some of the site plans. There's also a laydown yard, office laydown yard that's out here at Hoagland's old salvage dump over there on the east side of the river. They're going to be using that area temporarily. Hopefully we don't get any flooding, but that would be their only real issue with that site. Not necessarily that the site itself might flood, which it might, but more importantly, the road gets flooded over and they wouldn't be able to get in and out through that area. Every couple of years, about every 3 or 4 years, we do what's called a livestock facility survey. And this year may be one of those years again where we go back and do that. Essentially what it is during the winter time, which is really the only time you can do it, I take a list of all the livestock facilities that we know are here in the county, mostly confinements, and go around and check to see if they're still in use. Something we've been keeping track of now for about 10 years. Not that we're using the information for any nefarious purposes, it's just to know how much livestock activity is going on in the county and where is it, so that we can do some of our planning to try to keep development away from those areas as well. So it's not just me going around looking at it, and the reason we do it in the winter is you actually have to have snow on the ground to see if a building is being used, because they use them, they're there on a daily basis. And so, other than me going up and knocking on doors and saying, hey, is this hog facility still in activity, I can see from the activity on the ground whether or not somebody's actually in there daily. And so that gives me a pretty good idea of, you know, whether or not something's still in activity. Plus, you can see the heat rising out of the exhaust.
So you don't contact the operators then?
No.
Okay.
And it's more of an informal, just wanting to kind of have a handle on where things are. We're not gonna do anything with it other than try to steer other development away from those areas to try to minimize the clash between ag and non-ag uses.
You do this about every 5 years, you said?
Three,
3 years? Okay.
yeah, because the industry changes so quickly.
Yeah.
As you know, 3 years ago, there were cattle herds, and today there's a lot less because of the drought a couple of years ago. So we do try to keep an eye on it, and a lot of the facilities have closed or been shuttered because there's just not apparently a market for it as much as there used to be. But we do keep a little bit of an eye on things just to try to help with our planning. We will be doing some ordinance amendments to both the zoning and the subdivision ordinance. The zoning is really housekeeping, bringing our public notice requirements in line with the code, which is actually in line with your public notice requirements. It'll be the same now. We don't know for sure where it came from, but whatever is in our zoning ordinance had no relation to the Iowa code or anything else. But it was there, and so we followed it, and that's what we did, and that's what the ordinance said we should do. So we were always legal. It's just the Iowa code says that it should follow your pattern of public notice. So that's what we're going to do.
I know at the last department head meeting, Denny brought up, you know, code of ordinances and updating it. When was the last time we updated our code of ordinances?
The whole
'Cause
thing?
yeah, it hasn't been done
We've
in
never
the
done
5
it.
years I've been here.
No, it's never, well, in the 20 years I've been here, it's never been done. Most of the departments don't use an ordinance for anything. I mean, the zoning and subdivision ordinances are updated regularly.
Okay.
So when Lisa sent me that email, I said, you don't need me, right? Because
No, well, it was just basically what I said at the department head meeting was, any department that is structured around ordinances, need to look at them, if we need to update them, because there's no way we can update, one person can update them all.
No.
So it's gotta be done individually through the individual department that is using it.
Right, because I remember we've done several
yeah,
updates for you, but I don't remember
Well,
any for any other departments.
I don't call them updates, they were amendments.
Yes.
An update to me would mean we changed a lot of stuff all at once. Because we're constantly in that process with the zoning ordinance and the subdivision ordinance, it's pretty much up to date. And we've done a lot of things. One thing you can do with an ordinance so that it's usable for a very long time is, instead of citing a specific permit fee or a specific language that's also found somewhere else, if I can cite the Iowa code section where that's found,
sure.
then that section usually just regenerates every year. So you don't cite Iowa code section 335, 19, or 2013. You just cite the section, and then it automatically regenerates for all time until that section is changed. And so that's one way to keep your ordinances constantly updated without having to go in and refresh them by changing dates. You can say the fees are set by resolution by the Board of Supervisors. That way you're not putting the fees in the ordinance. So as fees change, you don't have to go back and amend the ordinance all the time. A resolution is a much cleaner, quicker thing to do. For the most part, the basic text of any ordinance stays the same. I mean, the zoning
It's the
ordinance-
additions and the resolutions that change that ordinance.
Right, and those are done, they shouldn't be done on a regular basis in a large way. I mean, your document should be fairly stable, but sometimes things need to be changed, and that's the point of the amendment.
Well, we
process.
kind of got in, as we looked at it a little bit, and it has to be done legally, You know, and our legal system is very, very backed up right now. I mean, it's just hard to throw something else on them. So, but I know we need to probably do something, and I honestly can't see us honestly doing something, because of the, like you say, we can make it work by adopting a resolution.
Right, and part of the problem is that most of the ordinances we've adopted don't have anything to do with one single department. You've got a fire ordinance,
Right.
you've got the plastic bag ordinance, you've got all kinds of those ordinances in there that don't have anything to do with a specific individual group of people that work here.
Right.
It's enforced by the police or by, you know, some outside agency in some cases, but there's nothing really that, the treasurer's office doesn't have an ordinance to follow.
Right.
And neither does the auditor. Well, the auditor's office is under the subdivision ordinance, but technically I'm responsible for the text of that ordinance, although the auditor is responsible for enforcing the ordinance. And yet I'm the one who runs all the subdivisions through the zoning process. So it's kind of split up. But other than that, the auditor really has no ordinances. The engineer may have one or two, but I don't think they're that large. So most of your staff don't have anything to do with an ordinance. And so the only one that can really review it would be the Board of Supervisors, because that's where these ordinances emanated from. Now, obviously, sometimes they were done at somebody else's request. The fire ordinance, for instance, the plastic bag ordinance, that definitely was, you know, an outside thing.
And that, originally, that plastic bag ordinance only applied to 2 retail outlets in the county, one of which does not exist anymore, being the Harvester grocery store, or the convenience store. So that's down to just one place.
And do we, you know, what are we doing? I mean, I know for a fact Randall is not violating the ordinance. They're not using plastic bags. But is there a cost to that ordinance in some way? Or?
You know, and if Randalls was to come to us and ask that be removed, seeing as how it's the only retail outlet in the county, it'd be pretty tough not to say, yeah, it should be eliminated.
Well, not only that, but I think if you're looking around, and I'm in the county driving the roads all the time, you'll find more McDonald's bags and Walmart plastic bags than you do Randall's bags. Obviously, Randall's doesn't have any now, but I don't think they use that many to begin with.
No.
And so most of our production of trash is coming from the incorporated areas, which we have no authority over. So, that being said, we are updating a couple of parts of the zoning and subdivision ordinance. The subdivision ordinance is rather arcane, and I won't get into it. It's mostly done for the sake of the auditor's office, adding a provision of how to describe something. We're doing off and on throughout the year, more on than off. I do daily visits to sites for septic placement or building placement, and sometimes those are multiple times to the same site, depending on the availability of contractors or somebody changing their mind. That's something that is ongoing throughout the year. From the public health end of things, there is a possible return of West Nile virus. We found apparently there were some mosquitoes already that tested positive for West Nile virus, and I can't remember exactly where they were, but we know that it's at least around again.
Not in Iowa already.
No.
Okay.
No, yeah, it's not here, but West Nile had kind of ducked under the radar over the last couple of years. And so when I heard it was on the news report that they'd found some mosquitoes that were testing positive for West Nile, that always perks my ears up. The one thing also that we're doing that's kind of a longer term project, but Lisa's been working on very diligently, and it's tied up with virtually everything my office does. all of our records, we hope eventually will be fully digitized. They'll be in a database and searchable, so that any property in the county, you can find documents dealing with that property. And then hopefully at some later date, that gets married into the GIS system, Geographical Information System, which when you go to your map, digital map of your property, you'll be able to click on that property and draw up all of those documents. So whether there were ever any building permits, septic permits, new wells, underground storage tanks, zoning violations, special use permits, variances, everything will be attached to that property. And it's a giant leap forward, we're hoping, for the historical nature of the information associated with a given parcel. I mean, I think it would be really nice for people to be able to, if you're looking at a property, to come to the GIS map and click on that lot and find out kind of the whole, quote, governmental history or what has transpired on that property. Now, in some cases, we're not going to have very many records at all. But where we do, it's nice to have them. One of the main ways that these records are used currently is for septic systems. They're accessible not just to people that are here, but people anywhere can look them up. And that's been a really nice feature to offer people, especially the contractors. They are just thrilled to have access to it. We're having a little trouble now with the contractors being able to access some of it because of our switch to DevNet. It's really pretty much destroyed our permitting system in some ways.
I'm sure that will be corrected.
Well, we're hoping so, yes. But that being said, the digitization was completely handled by Lisa. She's done a fantastic job. It's a lot of hard, long, boring, tedious work. And in a lot of cases, we weren't just entering in data, but we were having to go back and find out, okay, well, where was Rural Route 2? Because they didn't have addresses in the past. And sometimes we'll get lucky and there'll be a partial legal description. And so there was a good deal of detective work that Lisa had to do, and I would help her out when it got to a point where she just couldn't find anything. And usually if she couldn't, then there's a good chance I wasn't going to be able to find it either. But it was, I think, a fantastic opportunity. As Lisa came on, this really started it toward the beginning of her employment, and it got her the opportunity to get really familiar with all different kinds of aspects of our system. And between the two of us, we kind of started to enjoy it as almost a detective would, solving a murder case. Because there were a lot of properties where we did have to go in and try to figure out, okay, where is this thing? Because they were done by section, township, and range. So we knew that one of the 36 sections in this township, it was in there somewhere. And we knew it was in one of those sections. But when you've got 16 townships, that's a lot of sections. And so if something got misfiled, and instead of 1683-18, it went to 1683-19, well, you're off by a whole township. You're not even anywhere close to where you're supposed to be. So it was we took our time to make sure we were doing it right. But I'm fairly confident that what data we've recovered and how we've patched it up is correct where we've done it. There were some we simply could not establish a property for. Nothing made sense.
What do you do then?
There's no point in keeping a document that you can't relate to anything. So those documents were finally just destroyed. There were actually surprisingly not that many of those. You would have thought there'd been more over 50 years of permit keeping for Marshall County, but it taught us a lot. And like I said, now we've got all these things on file, and they can be found a lot more easily. They're not quite ready to be found because we haven't completed the transition yet, but they are all at least in digital form. We've got a few left to do, some different types of permits. We did them in order of priority. which ones we thought we would actually use the most, so that they were done first.
So once this is all digitized, then that construction company can just go online and get that, or how is that process gonna work?
Yes, the theory is that you can go online and search for any permit type. We've got a system called e-permits, which we use for taking permit applications. It's all done digitally. We don't handle paper anymore. So you can literally file for your building permit at midnight in your pajamas from your home. Contractors can, it's 9:30, everybody's ready for bed, and he forgets that he didn't file for an application for a septic permit, and he's gonna be starting that job tomorrow. They can fill it out at 9:30 at night, and it's in here and waiting, so that we are made aware. I get sent an email notice of each application that comes in. So yes, contractors can use it, and we're hoping, well, obviously, we're gonna make it up so that it's all public information, so they can all access it. In the old days, you had to physically come to the office, or at least call our office, and then we would have to wade through those geo files, which, 16 times 36 is how many sections there are in the county. And that's a lot of paperwork to file through. Some of those files were that thick. And it wasn't in really any discernible order other than newest to oldest.
Oh, wow.
So what she was doing was much more than just cataloging this stuff. We were separating things out, making sure that we were getting them into some kind of order. It was a long, lengthy process, and we're close to the end now. And once we are, I think it'll be a real advantage for the county taxpayers. As part of that, we did a special use permit survey in which Lisa created a list of all the special use permits that have been issued. We separated out the ones that were for actual, uses, things that were a little unusual, and then the ones that were granted for mobile homes, that was typically the way a mobile home was allowed to be put up before. We now give building permits. We don't do that. So once we had those separated out, I took that list and went through the county and checked to see if the mobile homes were still there, were they even still in use? Because once they left, that permit was no longer valid. And then also we were looking to see if some of those uses that were granted that weren't mobile homes but were something else, if they were still in action.
What would be some of the special use permits used for?
Oh, there were, like a golf course, for instance. We've got a recreational area out here on Highway 14 north of town where the dirt pile is. There were all kinds of different things like that. That's why they're special use permits, because there's no law that says you can do X, you can do Y. It's one of those things that there is no law for, so we have to grant them a permit because it's not specified in the ordinance that it can be done. So that's typically the way those things were handled, and they had been left, for years unexamined. They just got filed away, and that was it. So that is the extent of my report. I think you had some questions, though.
We've had some people contact us that own properties that are less than 1 acre. Harold, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah.
Come up to the microphone. Have we got that turned on?
Yes.
Okay.
He might have to look.
Some issues with that?
Looks good.
It looks good.
Thank you.
As you know, Harold Lanning. Let me just kind of give a little where it all started from. We received a letter from John back on, I think, as luck will have it, on Friday the 13th. And anyway, it states that if you don't have an acre of property and you are destroyed by fire, storm, whatever, that you would, in more than 60%, you would not be able to rebuild. So this letter went out to people on Vine Avenue and Wallace Avenue only. So I contacted John to find out what I could find out about it and so forth. And had to file for a
Variance.
variance that would go before the Board of Adjustment and decide whether it would be granted or not. We built in 1965, and when we built in 1965, we met all the requirements that there were to be met at that time. The area where I live, there's a lot of houses on that road, and I went on and kind of looked up the properties that were fit in that category. That was 1 acre, less than 1 acre, and I came up with 17 of them. And I'm not saying that's totally accurate, but it's pretty darn close. All built in the 60s and the 70s, except one, and built in 2002. Also on Wallace Avenue, I just picked some that I knew the people that lived there and so forth. And on Wallace Avenue, there are 4 that I know. And then I got curious and I thought, well, there's 4 houses directly south of me, 0.8 of a mile across the field, and on Main Street Road, to see what their situation is, and they're 0.75. I guess my issue is if this went, and as I'm told, and John maybe can the exact date, but went in effect in 1980. And this is all news to us. And I guess, and I've also been told, and I think John will verify this, that we're not the only ones. They're all over this county. And I guess what I feel is not proper about it is that anyone and everyone who fits in this category should be notified. And I guess I use the example that if a storm comes, and maybe I'm a little paranoid, and I probably am, but I'm also a realist to know that tomorrow night we could have a storm wipe us out. But I just got to use this example that if people on Vine Avenue were notified of this and were granted a variance and could rebuild, but the people on Main Street Road didn't know about it and were wiped out and went to rebuild and say, well, no, you can't rebuild. I guess I have a hard time feeling that that's fair. And I guess I wouldn't want to be in you gentlemen's position when they come to you and find out that you knew about this and weren't notified and knew that there may be some other action that they could take and so forth. I also did some number crunching on the taxes that the people pay, and on average on Vine Avenue, it's about $1,633. On Wallace, it was $1,900, $1,902. On Main Street Road, it was $1,591. Now, I realize that in the county budget, maybe that's not a lot of money, but if you multiply that countywide and so forth, that's quite a bit of change. But it's not just about money. I mean, it's about, this is my home. We built in 1965, married 2 years, raised our kids, retired, as well as about virtually everybody on that road. And to think that now, after 52 years, we got to pack up and go somewhere else. And it's almost, hate to say this, but I almost feel like Marshall County doesn't want me anymore. And if they don't want me, then I guess I'll have to go somewhere where I am wanted. I also did a little checking on this issue of the bank not loaning on a property less than an acre. And I went to GNB, Grundy National Bank, and I talked to Jerry Hosky. I explained the situation, have you ever heard of that? And he said, I never heard of it in my life. He said, he hollered at Carrie Judge, who is a mortgage lender there, and handles all the mortgages and, those, had her come in, and he says, tell her what you just told me. I never heard of such a thing. Have you ever talked to any of the other bankers that, are they aware of this? Not to my knowledge. I said, would you ask around and see if, but, so, I don't know, it just seems that, to me, the fair way to do this would be to, whatever you want to call it, notify everybody that fits in this category, and do some kind of a blanket thing, that these people are all notified and taken care of, because I'll tell you what, I'd be one mad guy had I not known about it, and I'm probably lucky maybe I do know about it and so forth, and I've set wheels in motion to try to get myself, covered and so forth. But I wouldn't want to be somebody else that doesn't know about it and finds out after the
Yeah,
fact.
now, Harold, all of you have septic systems.
Yes.
And leach fields.
Yes,
And everybody, all these are working,
Yes.
and you probably put one in when you built your house.
put one in and when we built the house, and then in I can't remember what year it was, I got the records, but we had to replace the distribution box and the lines. And, but it was in, I can't remember exactly, but it's been quite a few years ago now.
Probably got 25 years out of the first one.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Yep. So, yeah, that's, and I don't know of any others up there that, are in a situation where, Now, one avenue I am trying to explore and haven't been successful yet is there's an empty lot next to me, and I'm trying to see if I could purchase that, because that's at .64 acres or something like that, and not big enough that anybody could build on anyway, and so forth. I don't know if that's ever gonna come to, fruition or not, I don't know. But,
Let's just for giggles here, hypothetically say, John, we did have a loss on one of these homes where it was less than an acre. What process would be involved where they would look at, they want to rebuild, what they would have to do?
On the existing parcel,
Yes.
the only thing they could do is either one of two things: buy more land to bring it up to 1 acre, or seek a variance to allow them to put a building back on that property with less than 1 acre.
Okay. And what would the process be on seeking that variance, and what would the chances be that they would be denied and or granted that variance?
Well, that's up to the Board of Adjustment.
Okay.
I would probably recommend, in most cases, depending on the lot and the layout of the lot, Harold knows all about this with his own parcel. Sometimes you can't do a septic system regardless of, well, sometimes even if you got 2 acres, you can't do it. But it would depend a lot on that. If I recommended the approval, chances are the Board of Adjustment would most likely do that. Billy, you've been a Board of Adjustment member. They're not required to do what I tell them to do, so they have their own ability to override any recommendations I have. There is a good chance that after a house was gone, the board would say, well, there is no house here anymore, and the problem has been eliminated, and now we want to do it again and create another new problem, because, and I understand what Harold's saying is, this is my land, I built here, I've lived here. The fact of the matter is, if a house is destroyed, their insurance will pay whatever they're due, and so they could rebuild, they just couldn't do it right there. But if they added more land or found another lot in the area that was of sufficient size, because as Bill pointed out, this is not really so much about how much land you have, it's about, do you have enough for a septic system? Mm-hmm. And there are certain areas in this county where we've got houses in this situation that are, for instance, the first one we ran into with this problem was on a corner. So, and it was on a lot that literally just barely fit the house. There wasn't room for any leach field at all for a septic. There's no sewer available. It's on a corner. I can't put in a mechanical system and dump water onto the county roads because there's no ditches where this place is. and we can't dump water onto their neighbors. So there's no good solution for fixing this house. I just can't do it. And that's where, most of the cases, that would be the only real instance where I would think we wouldn't allow a variance.
So it really doesn't necessarily come down to what Harold's asking for, is to contact everybody that has less than an acre, because it really has to do with whether a septic system would be able to be installed. And like you just got done saying, you could have a 2-acre lot that wouldn't be accessible for a septic system.
Yeah, it's not likely, but yes.
Okay,
Because it's more about elevations and where your other buildings are and, you know, just the on-the-ground attributes of a property that have absolutely nothing to do with how much acreage it has. For instance, if it has a high water table, I have to have 3 feet of separation between the bottom of the leach line and the water table. That's got nothing to do with the acreage. And we've got a guy digging a hole this morning that I gotta go up and take a look at as soon as we're done here, because that's one of the issues we're looking at, is there might be a high water table there, and we won't be able to get a septic in. So, the acreage was done primarily because you need at least an acre to have a house, any outbuilding, and at least one leach field, the first one. But no property should have just room for one leach field. You ought to have room for a second one when the first one fails. And granted, that almost never happens to the original buyer, but it happened to Harold. He had to put in a new leach field because over time, they just don't work anymore. So the acreage is really about, it's not so much about the space, it's about what that space is used for. And that's why that provision was put in there, was to make sure that when houses were built, they did have that availability of land for the septic. That being said, a lot of these lots were designed before the 1960s. The subdivisions were split out. Green Mountain, Dunbar, Dillon, Van Cleve, all those little towns, they were done in the 1800s. And back then, there was an outhouse. There were no leach fields. There weren't even garages. You might have had a shed for a horse and a cart maybe, but you didn't have all these outbuildings that we have. The houses were smaller. So as time changed and housing changed and the land use itself changed, we needed to have a larger lot size, and that's eventually, by the time we got to the 80s, that's when the county decided it was time to bring on a 1-acre minimum, because they weren't able to do what they were supposed to do anymore with the new requirements from the DNR for these leach fields for septic systems.
John, I'm wondering here, we got a lot of people with homes and things. Is there a legal possibility of these people banding together 2-3 homes, creating a new leach field for those houses?
And you're not supposed to put multiple houses in, by state law, you're not supposed to have multiple houses on one septic
So
system.
there is a legal barrier there then?
And it's kind of a good reason, because if it goes bad, who's gonna
Pays for
fix
it.
it?
See, that'd have to all be parceled out, but
Well, yeah, but the fact of the matter is, if you don't pay for it, and your neighbor doesn't wanna have sewage in his basement, he's obliged to pay for the whole thing himself. And in some cases, it would be, depending on the elevations of the house, one house might get sewage infiltration or backup before the other two.
yeah. I was just thinking, farmers go together and have drainage districts, and I thought, house owners could go together and have sewage districts.
Actually,
Yeah.
they can't, because the law says they can't.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
And in terms of Harold's suggestion that we notify everybody, unless you were going to change the law so that we weren't granting variances, there's absolutely no way I can give a variance hearing to everyone who needs one in a timely fashion. We have to take this in bitefuls. There were actually 26? 26 lots we found on Vine Avenue and Wallace Avenue. And those are the ones that we initially notified. Our next hearing, we're going to have 6 people on the agenda. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you figure you have to listen to each case individually, and the Board of Adjustment is appointed, they're not paid for anything they're doing. they're doing it at 6 o'clock at night, they're not gonna wanna stick around to hear 20 cases a night. And in order to get that done on the scale that we're talking at, we're talking about notifying hundreds of people.
Why don't we grandfather everything? And because you know, one thing I'm thinking, what if, you know, if I bought a house in 50 years ago, and I built everything according to what the specs were at that point. Now here we are 50-some years later, and who's ever changed it, whether you know, I guess I was under the impression maybe the bankers had something to do with if your house was destroyed, you know, you got more money, more real value assets in your land than you do your building, and you're wanting to build a new house on it.
What Harold said, I mean, I'm perfectly willing to believe him that he spoke to them and that was their response to the bank. One of the reasons this even came up was because last summer, I spent a month dealing with a house that a bank mortgage company would not grant a mortgage for because it could not be rebuilt. It was on 0.3 acres, and that was included with the appraisal. Once the mortgage company found out about it, they refused to approve a loan. Well, the buyer had already moved in, the seller had moved to Arizona, he was gone. Everything had started forward, and all of a sudden this popped up. I'd never heard of it either. I've been doing this job 20 years. We've got hundreds of these lots that have been changing hands over the decades, and nobody's ever said anything about this from the banking perspective. And then all of a sudden this thing reared its ugly head, and when I spoke with the mortgage company, he said this is industry-wide, and no mortgage company is supposed to issue a mortgage for a house that can't be rebuilt, because once the house is destroyed, the value of the underlying property is less than it was with the house on it. And when you go to your property tax assessment, there's the land value and then there's the structure's values. Well, that land value is more with a structure on it than with a structure off of it. And the banks don't want to lose money on that underlying land value. So that's why they don't want to lend to it. Because I couldn't figure it out myself. I said, well, if they get a mortgage, they're going to have mortgage insurance. It'll pay off. What do you care? They said, well, it won't pay off because it only pays off for what there's actual value for. So we're still going to be upside down on that.
See, and if the tornado blows it away, the insurance seldom pays 100%. Because they're going to say, you know, we insured your whole property, I mean your whole house, your basement's still good, we're not going to pay you for that. And they never come out 100%. At least in my experience, I've never seen them come out 100%.
And there again, you know, something, if, heaven forbid, a tornado would come through, wipe the whole area out, we can't rebuild it, and they go to Arizona and live, is that just, we lose that tax money?
I know what you're saying, but the problem is you create a problem if you don't, if it never fixes, which is the whole point of having the new law, was so that at least all new lots had to be created at 1 acre. The existing ones are grandfathered in. You can stay as is. You don't have to bring more land into your parcel. You don't have to tear the house down. You don't have to move the house. The grandfathering is that you can stay on less than 1 acre.
The non-grandfathering is if the house is destroyed.
Well, that's
you
part
can't
of the
rebuild.
ordinance specifically to try to get these problems to no longer be
Yeah.
problems. And so if we do what Harold proposes, which believe me, emotionally, I understand what he's asking for. But if we do that, then there's really no point in having the 1 acre minimum anymore, because these parcels are all permanent now. They will never go away. And once we've got 2 septic systems on some of these, there's nothing left. I can't do anything. And then what? How do we fix it at that point? So while I'm fully sympathetic to what Harold would like us to do, and we are going through this variance process specifically because I do understand these are the people's most valuable possession. It's their home.
Right.
And whether it's for sentimental reasons or for a financial reason, we need to try to help where we can. And when we can give an individual variance, we will do that. But if you were to blanket, just say, you're all covered,
Okay.
I don't see that as good policy.
I guess I understand that end of it too.
And then the insurance companies will let you rebuild fairly close. They're not gonna let you rebuild in Eldora. They certainly are not gonna let you rebuild in Florida. They're gonna say, you gotta take this money and you gotta do it here, you know?
And as I explained to Harold and I explained to all these people when I talked to them, I'm not really that concerned about the destruction problem. Because in my view, you do get your insurance money. You can buy another house somewhere else or build a new house somewhere else. That's not to me the issue. I'm more worried about if this issue with the banks is industry-wide, which Harold seems to think or say that some of the bankers here don't even know about it, which isn't to say that it isn't the truth, but I didn't know about it either. And so if it is truly industry-wide, that's the danger I'm afraid of. Because now you can't sell your house even if nothing ever happens from a tornado or a fire.
That's the problem,
That's the problem.
because now people have an asset that they cannot divest themselves.
Exactly. So
Yes, I
the
think
burning down the 60% issue,
Probably
that's really
because
not the thing that concerns me.
Banks
It's
didn't,
this
when he
whole
built,
issue of
they
being
didn't
able to sell a
package their
house.
loans.
And that's exactly
They
where
did
we're
a
at in Green
another
Mountain.
package of
Correct.
loans and selling them somewhere.
And that has nothing to do with lot size, although it does, but mostly it's
It's all
because they
septic.
can't pass the time of transfer inspections.
Yes.
Because they can't put in leach fields because their lots aren't big enough. And so this whole thing's just one giant snarled mess.
Yeah.
And only part of it has anything to do with our 1 acre minimum requirement.
So in your esteemed judgment, what do we do? I mean, this is a problem, and I guess I'm almost, agreeing with John. It'd be awful hard to send everybody out a letter that would, fill that.
The only way to do it quickly is to do something in a blanket way that the board would pass.
But that's
Some
that's
type
not
of
what you want to do.
Well, I don't think that's wise policy, no. But that's the only way to do it quickly, and as Harold said when he was asking for his, or came in for his variance application, we could have a tornado tomorrow. Well, there's no way I can get people through the variance
No.
process.
And there
Unless-
again, rather than, in all honesty, rather than to take 20 of them a night, we'll say, I don't agree putting that on your shoulders. I mean, you can't do them all at once, and it can't all be, done that way. I guess, take them as, if they come in, take them as they come.
Well, and that's the way we intended to do it. We did it in this instance because there was one case that came up specifically, which the bank would not lend for in this neighborhood. And when we found that one case, I had Lisa look. And
That's what started all this?
That's what started all this. And I said, it's a neighborhood, they're gonna talk, because he had come in and made an application for a variance. And that was before we sent out a letter. And so we found his, but then we found the 26 others in this area. Because it is a neighborhood, we thought it was important then that we go ahead and send out a notice to everybody in the area who was affected, because just word of mouth would get around from neighbor to neighbor. And we wanted them to understand what they were dealing with and what the possibilities were. So it was an actual incident that brought this all to a head. We didn't just decide one day to all of a sudden start having
Yeah.
variance hearings.
Well, a question I have is I've applied for the variance, and it won't be acted upon until the 28th of April. What happens then, and I'm probably a pessimist or whatever, but I'm also a realist to know that it can happen any given day, any given time, and so forth, that I would get destroyed. And I had applied for the variance. What is my likelihood of getting a variance then? Are you just gonna say, well, you're already wiped out, head on down the road? Or are you gonna look at it realistically and say, well, he had every intention of, complying and so forth, and grant it?
Well, the variance would still, that meeting would still occur.
Yeah, and as Harold asked us this when he was in for his application, and as I told him then, you've made the application, you've already, put your marker down and said, hey, I intended to get right with this thing. So in that instance, I don't think the Board of Adjustment would deny it, and I don't think there'd be no reason for me to recommend denial, because he had made the application.
The
It's
intent was made.
It's just that, yeah, it's just that the storm took it before the hearing came, and that's not his fault. But if you've not made an application, then we need to look at that from a perspective of, well, they didn't get in under the wire, so to speak, and because there was no application, we're not really obliged to grant a variance here if it shouldn't be given. And I'm not saying that they will or won't be given, because it's got to be done on an individual basis. No two lots are exactly the same. So we're gonna have to take them one at a time when they come in and look at them for what they are. In Harold's case though, he's already made his application, and I don't see any reason to think that they wouldn't hear it as they would if the house were still there, even if it didn't.
Like I say, I think a lot of it has to do with the intent.
And we certainly can't speak for a different board. Now, let's hypothetically say they turned it down. Harold can then bring that to this body?
No, once a Board of Adjustment makes a decision, that's final.
Okay.
Harold can then sue Marshall County Board of Adjustment in district court. You have 30 days from the date of the board's decision to file a case. And then the court would decide whether or not what the board did was appropriate. Now, in that case, the courts usually only file or find against a Board of Adjustment or a zoning commission if they did something knowingly and willingly illegal. And Harold's been on the board before, and I think, were you part of the board that got sued, but you were the one that didn't vote with them?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in that case, there was at least one case where we didn't defend our own Board of Adjustment because what they did was wrong. And so we weren't going to take up for them. But if they don't do anything illegal and intentionally do it illegally, their decision is based on a good, sound reason. The court's not gonna overturn it either, but that would be his only remedy, would take it to court. The Board of Supervisors doesn't have any input on variances.
Well, Harold, I'm not sure we got anything accomplished other than kind of maybe a few questions. You know.
Yeah, and don't take my word for the bank. I mean, go out and talk to Jerry Hoskey. That's who I talked to. Talk to Kerry Judge. That's who he had come in and so forth.
This is almost clear as mud.
Well, yeah, I don't
And-
feel like I know what to do.
No,
You
I'm
know,
almost, I think
can't-
I'm more confused now than when we started today, and
So why'd we do it then? I mean, we're confused, no.
But,
You're a
you know,
leader, Denny.
they've made a lot of, you know, loans and so forth, and it kind of startled, I mean, really surprised me that they weren't.
Okay, if
aware of
they
it.
make a loan, his house is destroyed by fire, will they loan him the money to build the house? Back in the-
As I told Harold when I was on site with him, and as I've told a lot of the others, you can do nothing. You're not obliged to come get a variance. We're letting you know, and we're giving you your options. And if you do nothing, maybe the house never gets destroyed, it goes on forever, you go to sell it, the appraiser never bothers to ask the question, it never appears on an appraisal, and the bank goes ahead and lends the money as they've been doing for decades.
But I thought on a title search or whatever they do on a property, aren't those always questions that come up? I mean, how do you?
I can't speak to that to residential. I know on the commercial property that Kathy and I own, on our insurance, we have a specific line item for ordinance and law coverage. So that if something were to happen to our commercial structure, that the insurance rebuilds our structure to the current building standards, not what was in effect in 1941 when our building was built. So I know we're covered that way. This is really not an ordinance and law structure, because you would be rebuilding the structure, but it's an issue with the septic.
Well,
So I don't-
it is an ordinance, I mean, you
Yeah.
do need 1 acre, so.
And I'm wondering if there's something in a homeowner's insurance policy that would cover ordinance and law,
See, I don't know. I
similar
just-
to what my commercial policies are.
Yeah.
You're the insurance guy.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know about residential.
I've never heard of this before, so.
Well, I've heard about it in the commercial.
the
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
that's been around a long time. I don't know about residential in that regard.
Well,
But you see, some of those people would say, let her blow, I'll take the money and go.
yep,
And if you take a lesser amount, let's say you take 60% of what your, I'm just pulling that out of the air, but it's close. If you take 60% of what your house is insured for, they'll let you take that money and go wherever you wanna go.
well, but it
It's
depends
guys-
on the kind of insurance policy you have, if it's replacement
Oh, yeah.
or if it's actual value.
Actual value, you just get her.
But, you know, like Harold, they got a property that they built in 65.
Yeah.
They wanna stay there forever and
Yep,
ever.
yep.
And so he ain't gonna just say, let it blow.
That's
You know,
right.
You know, I mean, he's gonna, everything he can to keep
Yeah,
it.
so they're not all gonna be in the
No.
same boat.
Yeah,
Well, and something else to think about is, let's say the house does blow down, and assume that it was in the city, and it was built in the 1920s, and now you're going to rebuild it. Well, you can't build it the way you built it in the 1920s. And that's essentially what we're asking here is, the lot was created in the 60s, and it was fine for then, but we need a bigger lot now.
Yeah.
So ordinances change, and you're required when something happens to bring it up to code. And that's really what this is all about. It is a change in the law that was taken place to try to resolve something, so that when something does happen, we can fix it and move forward without having that be an issue anymore. So just as your trusses, for instance, in your roof system, might have to have a certain load rating, and before you had 2x4s, you know, peaked up into your rafters, that was the old roof. Well, that isn't gonna work anymore. You gotta change with the new code.
it's almost like this is more of a question of insurability than anything else.
Well, no, it's resale. That's,
I was gonna
Res-
say, it's
resale,
the
but if-
bankers are gonna control the purse strings, cause if I can't get my
But
money.
if you can't insure it,
Well,
then it can't be replacement value, so the bank isn't gonna wanna loan it.
well, I don't think the insurance companies are basing the 1 acre minimum on anything.
What if changes happen again? What if septic changes and ordinances happen?
And they very
What
possibly
happens
can.
to the variance? What
The
happens
variance
to
is
the
permanent. Once Harold gets his variance, that doesn't go to Harold. It's given in his name, but it's for that piece of ground, and it stays there in perpetuity. And the variance that we've been giving out, we've given 2 of them already, says that this is a variance to allow the placement or replacement of single-family dwelling on less than 1 acre at this site. So that will never change. Once it's recorded, it's permanent.
So as septic specs change and as houses get even bigger, and they have this variance, see what I'm saying? It's still gonna be good.
Yeah,
the variance is on the property, I presume,
correct.
and the replacement of the property, or the buildings on the property.
On that legally described
Right.
property. There's a
Right.
legal description on each variance. And it's given in the current owner's name, Harold's, it's in his name, but, because he has to apply for it. But the variance really is for that parcel, it's not for the individual. So when Harold sells or passes away, that parcel maintains that variance, even though
The variance stays with the parcel.
right.
But you can add 3 more bedrooms. You see, you can't make it bigger.
Well, if his insurance is only gonna give him the value of the house that it is
Yeah,
today,
but
if he
see-
wants to add 3 more bedrooms, he's
No,
gonna,
he
he's gonna have
can't
to do that
because-
on his own.
Well, but then your septic system won't allow that. you see.
Well, now that's
That's
something
another, don't get into that one.
Okay,
we're going
Yeah.
far afield here, because that happens today.
Yeah.
A guy puts in a septic system for his 3-bedroom home, he moves, regardless of the lot size, the new owner comes in and puts in an addition, and now they've got 3 more bedrooms, they've doubled the volume of the house, but they never change the septic system because it's already there.
Yeah.
And it's not up to code, but they're not required to bring it up to code.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
No,
Oh.
I mean, it's smart, you wouldn't wanna overload your system.
Yeah.
But, or even on these houses where, let's say, a little old lady lives there for 20 years all alone, but it's a 3-bedroom house. She moves out, now a family with 5 kids move in. Well, now all of a sudden, that septic system's getting a whole lot of volume that it didn't get for 20 years. And it's not sized appropriately either, but they don't change it. So that can happen regardless of
Okay.
what we're dealing with. That happens all the time.
So where do we go with this? I mean, where do we,
Well, if you're going to
I would just.
make a decision, I think you need to take some time and think about it individually as to what you
Yeah.
think you wanna do. I can give you recommendation, but there's really only a couple of things you can do. Either let this variance process continue on its own, or you pass a grandfather clause that says, okay, from now on, everybody that's on less than 1 acre today can stay there.
And I would have a tendency to let the variance process work its way through.
Well, I think
I don't know, we'll think,
being
we gotta
fresh
think about
on
it.
this, you guys need to take some
Yeah.
time
Yeah,
to,
I mean,
Think about
There's a lot of different sides here.
That's
Boy.
where we're at, sir. I do thank you for coming, and thanks for the
Well,
time change.
Yeah, and I,
I'm
You
not
know,
sure
we
we
had
got anything
gotten so many
accomplished.
things off our plate lately, Harold, that we were almost needing something
were
else
almost
to
empty?
eat
We
on.
needed Harold to
And
bring
I
us
really
some-
appreciate
Yeah.
you bringing this
Load
up.
this up again.
well, I appreciate the opportunity to, you know,
Yeah.
to speak to you. And I can't speak for all the others, I'm speaking for myself, but yet, in a sense, I am speaking for others that maybe just, you know, just don't worry about things or don't even concern themselves with it, but I guess, I know putting myself, if I hadn't known about it and then found out I was in this can of worms, you know, after I'm in it, and nobody told me or I didn't know about it, you know. So, I realize it's kind of a complicated issue in that, but, I appreciate, you know, hearing me out, and, like I said, I've been here 52 years at that site, and I really don't have any intention or wanna go anywhere else, but, I appreciate your consideration.
Well, thank you, thanks again, Harold. All right, we'll move on to the, thank you for your report, John.
yeah.
I do appreciate it. Yep. Public forum, this is the time set aside for public to make comments on topics of county business other than those listed on this agenda. No action will be taken on these topics brought up in the public forum. And Corey, since you're the only public forum,
I don't think I brought anything for you.
I'm just gonna add that, John, I guess I never knew what, exactly your value of what, everything you do in your position until we changed offices and we got you tucked in with us and able to see a little bit about what, you know, you're doing. I mean, I watch you daily go from variances to noxious weeds to septic systems to beauty parlors. And, I guess we appreciate all that you've done for all the years. You're a hard guy sometimes to deal with, but you really, I mean, you stick by the rule, and I think that's very important, and I applaud you for that. And, so thank you for everything. Wait a minute, Harold wants us.
I just thought of one thing.
Uh-oh.
This letter that went out was on your letterhead and so forth. Do you ever counsel with these guys before you send out a letter on something that may be complicated or other than a straightforward, somebody just asking for a variance or a complaint or something? It seems like this is kind of involves a lot of issues in that. Do you normally do that, or you're not required to do that, or?
Well, I wouldn't say required or not required.
I think this was run by, he told us what he was gonna do. I mean, he's very, in all honesty, he's very open to what he's doing. Quite frankly, sometimes I don't understand it, but he'll throw it by us and tell us, you know, because we're not gonna, you know, we can't micromanage his department
Well, no, and you
either,
shouldn't
you
have
know.
to give him a blessing whether you can send out a letter or not, but that, you know.
I just felt it was the right thing to do, Harold. I didn't really even think about, you know, the further implications. We were just trying to do the best we could. And frankly, it's not a very good situation to make sure that those people out there were aware of what was happening. Because I remember when Lisa gave me the list, my jaw just about hit the floor. 26 in less than a square mile. I mean, that's a lot of houses. And when it's almost half the houses that are in that area, it's not a good percentage. And so I kind of was taken aback at the beginning because I knew these places were all over the county. And they've never been a problem before. We've never had this come up. And so that's why we decided we were gonna go ahead and do it. I think the board was aware to some degree, but they've been aware of this issue, so to speak, since the time of transfer law hit.
Yeah.
And we've been dealing with this in one shade or another for about 4 or 5 years now. And it's a thorny thing, and we're not having a whole lot of luck getting a good resolution to some of the problems, but we're trying.
Well, I didn't imply you did anything wrong, I just,
No.
didn't know.
No, he keeps us informed and on many, on a lot of things, on everything really, and, you know, we have, there again, these department head updates we have, you know, everything kinda comes out then, and plus being in the same office, you know, we hear what he's doing, and so it's been very helpful, I guess, I'll just say for me, that, of learning more about what his expertise areas are.
He does wear several hats.
Well, yeah, among other things, but thank you again, John. Anything else, public forum? Lisa, anything? David?
How about those Badgers?
I'm fine. Bill? All right, item number 6, the next regular session is April 14th, 2015 at 9 a.m. All business to be acted upon that session should be submitted to the county auditor and recorder's office or the board of supervisors. Office by Thursday, April 9, 2015 at 1 p.m. There will be no further business to come before the board. The meeting is adjourned at 11:11.